In 1969, when the Walt Disney World property was still wetlands, swamps, and pastures, Peter Markham, P.E., was a young engineer with Dames and Moore who was doing geotechnical work and site civil engineering for the early stages of the development. After pointing out to Disney management that they really needed to have an engineer on site, he was promptly hired as the first resident engineer. And soon thereafter, he was asked to organize and staff Disney's new in-house construction company, which was responsible for building the Magic Kingdom Park and much of the Walt Disney World Resort. You may not have ever noticed the windows that are on the upper stories of the buildings on Main Street, USA and the Magic Kingdom. Those windows advertise fictional businesses, but the names on those windows are very much real. In fact, it is one of the highest honors that Disney bestows, and only a select few individuals have been honored for their achievement with a window on Main Street, and Peter Markham is one of them. Please join me in welcoming the original Walt Disney World engineer, Peter Markham.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If you have trouble understanding what I'm saying when I say it, it's because I'm not a natural-born American citizen. I come from a country far away over the Atlantic Ocean called the United Kingdom. And I was glad to get out of that. After I completed my service in the Army Engineer Corps, I was hired by Dames and Moore to determine the best location for the Magic Kingdom. I had about 15 drill rigs and we were out punching holes in the ground all over the place, trying to help Disney make the best decision. J.B. Allen was the general contractor who built Disneyland California. And so Disney moved Allen to Florida to be their contractor and build the new entertainment district. It was custom to have meetings every month with the management of Walt Disney and the other support staff that you just heard my predecessor talk about. And whenever the Disney senior management came down for a meeting, they'd tour all the site, ask me all kinds of questions and say, you know, what's going on? And everyone was of the same opinion that I was, that things weren't going the way they should go. So at the end of the staff meeting one month, Roy Disney said, has anybody got anything else to say? And I said, yes, sir. He said, let's hear it. So I started out with J.B. Allen on not being a good steward of Disney's money. Of course, J.B. Allen was sitting right next to Roy Disney. Jumped out of his chair, called me every name you could think of. But after serving in 2 armies, no big deal, I'd learned And then everybody got up from the meeting, left, got on the plane and went to California. And as they left, they patted me on the back and said, great job, Pete. That's what we like to see. Someone who's willing to stand up for their beliefs. And then they all left. And I was left with J.B. Allen. So I went home that day and I said to my wife, Sue, I think I just blew my job. But I said, it had to be done. About an hour and a half later, I got a telephone call. Admiral Fowler was calling. He says, you have your engineer's license in Florida, my boy? I said, yes, sir. He said, do you have your engineer's license and general contractor's certification? I said, yes, sir. He said, good. We just fired Johnny Allen. He's in the process of moving all his people and equipment back to California. and we just formed Buena Vista Construction Company. You're it. Hire the people you need, get the equipment you need, and we will open October 1. And I gave him the only answer he would accept. Yes, sir. It was a very complicated project. The first phase of the Walt Disney really has no comparison to what goes on now when you've got a project on the Disney property. We didn't have any portable phones. We didn't have any internet. We didn't have any desktop computers. And you might be saying to yourself, how in the heck did he ever get anything done? Well, it's just the way it was. So we did what we could with what we had. We faced many challenges. Florida was a right-to-work state. Unions did not thrive here. And the unions, national headquarters in Washington, D.C., thought this is a good way to get Florida as a union contractor. So there was some stiff back and forwards, but finally they settled. And we had a special project agreement with all the unions, but it only applied to the Walt Disney property. It didn't apply to anything else, anywhere else. And of course, most constructors in Florida were not union, and they didn't really know how to do things the union way. They do things like call me at 5 o'clock in the morning saying, there's a picket line up, we can't get anybody to work. So I run, get dressed, hightail it out to the site, ask who's doing what. And one of the unions will say, well, we wanted to do this, and this one over here says it's their work and it's not. I said, time out, guys. Your people met with the Disney management and formed a private union that applied only to Walt Disney World. So get your people back to work and come and meet me at 9 o'clock in the morning and we'll sort out what the problems are. But you cannot stop the work. So they agreed, they backed off, and we were off and running. Let me tell you a little bit about how Disney develops a project. Unlike conventional engineering and architecture, the first persons on a project were a small group of creative Disney people. And they'd sit around and start throwing ideas back and forward, and they'd take 8.5 by 11 cardboard sheets with holes in them, and they keep pinning these up around the conference room. And then somebody would come up with a different idea, so we take down 2 or 3 of them, put new ones up, until there was no more shifting. They just about settled on what they wanted. So they got with the creative people from the studio and gave them all these storyboards and said, go to it. So they built a model that was 1/2 inch to the foot scale. They worked everything over, then they called in the rest of the creative people at Disney and say, okay, what do you think of this? And they get feedback. This was too high, that was too low, whatever. They finally settle on what the finished model would look like. Then they build a 1 inch to the foot scale model. Get that squared away, and they had a little instrument. I don't know whether they invented it or not, but you could put that instrument down on the floor of wherever project they were doing, and you could bend over, look through the instrument, and it would give you human height around the project. So you could look on it and see whether there was in the main street, there was air conditioners showing up on the roof that you could see from the ground, and that's not acceptable. So they finally get everything settled down, and then they would go over, hand it to the architects and the engineers, and said, build it. And they do not, they being the design group, do not accept changes. That's the model that they build. That's the thing they want you to give us the plans and to do, and get the contractors to do the work. And we'd have little arguments going back and forwards. But for an example, on Cinderella's castle, again, they took the model of the castle to the engineers and said, build it. And the engineers would come back and say, no, we can't have this funky little thing over here. It's got to be able to stand 115-mile-an-hour wind. You just can't do that. And the creative guys say, build it. We don't care about the wind. What's your problem? We're building a castle for people to be entertained in and look good. That's what we want. No exceptions. So the engineers and architects got way more involved than it had ever been before on a project, but they put it together. Another little example. Does everybody here know what a portcullis is on a castle? Right? Back in the 1300s, if you were inside your castle when somebody came up and said, we're going to take over all this, they drop at the main gate a portcullis, which is made up of wood. They drop that down and then fire their arrows from one side to the other. So we were needing a portcullis because we had a castle. They hired a new carpenter, and he goes up to the carpentry superintendent and says, here I am, I just got hired. So the superintendent says, okay, see that pile of wood over there? Here's some plans. Go and build us a portcullis. So this guy was really, he said, oh, I'm building in the Disney World. This is great. I really like this. And he put his heart and soul into it. I mean, there wasn't a place where two pieces of lumber came together that you could see through or that. He just got it super. And he goes over to the superintendent and he says, I finished. And the superintendent didn't even look at him. He said, good. Joe, you got an axe. Bill, you got a chain. Harry, you got a sledgehammer. Distress it. Because portcullises were used and they weren't beautiful pieces of furniture. And he just cried. He just literally stood there and cried as these guys went to it. And then we were out walking around the project, and the creative guy says, we need to see Bay Lake. It's a big part of the development. We've got to take a good look at it. So we got them some boats and they went, drove around Bay Lake. Then they tromped around Bay Lake and said, this is not acceptable. this is dirty, brown. We want a sparkling, clean lake. So I said, and how do you reckon I'm going to do that? And they said, not my problem. So we ended up putting a hydraulic jet dredge in Bay Lake, and we dug sand from the bottom, placed it behind the trees, the natural edge. You can see there, it's got Bay Lake, and then you've got a berm. So that allowed them to put good clean water in and raise the level of the water. So it's about halfway up the berm, so that no water from the trees and growth around it would flow into Bay Lake. Everything was floating out. Now, there ain't no way we could do that today. No way. But we were king of the roost at that time. Nobody dared tell us no. But so Bay Lake now looks great. It's just sparkling water. I would drink it, but then I was out making my route, patrolling through the construction, and the radio says, "Pete, get over here." I said, "Who's this?" He said, "Chuck Mile." That was the creative guy who was developing Tom Sawyer's Island and the fort and everything they got out there. So I go over there and I said, "Hey Chuck, what do you need?" He said, "What's that?" Pointed to a partly built wall. I said, "It's a tree." I said, "But what kind of a tree?" I said, "I don't know. It's a tree." He said, "That's southern pine. This fort is a replica of the western push, and that's what I want. Get rid of that southern pine and get true western pine." So I had to put a guy on an airplane, fly him out to Montana, supervise the cutting and loading and shipping of genuine pine from the west. And I bet you there's not one guy who goes out there and looks at that fort and says, "Good Lord, look at that. These guys just go all the way. That's genuine." But that's a day in the life of Disney. Then I was doing a walkthrough with Bill Martin. He was the creative guy for Main Street. So we're walking up Main Street, and Bill looks over and he says, "What's that?" I said, "That's a window, Bill." He says, "I know it's a window, but look where it is. It's too close to the door." So I said, No. I says, "Stu, bring me your plans. Let me see." And Bill Martin said, "I don't care what the plans say. It's too close." So I said, "Okay, Stu, move the window over 3 inches. And the window is already framed and everything. Just move it." I said, "Okay." So they started to get the tools out and work on the window. And I said, and Bill Martin says, No, leave the window alone. It's good. Move the door." And the door was already framed in and got 3 poured-in-place concrete steps in front of it. Well, you can't slice off 3 inches and pour 3 inches again over here. That don't work. But that's the way they work. That's, you know, it's, they see it and that's it. They don't care what the engineers and the architect do. Another little incident we had. Disney management were itching to get some film of the construction of Walt Disney World. So they brought down 3 or 4 camera crews from Walt Disney Productions. They all came down, and we were all standing up on a little hill looking over. And there's a footing that's been formed, rebar and everything. This was going to be the first concrete that was put in that was going to stay. So they got the films going, and the ready-mix truck came round the corner and got stuck. So I got around and said, quick, quick, send me a D8. Well, those of you that are in construction know the D8 is not a speed hound. So there were all the other people who were up there waiting and saying, what's going on? I said, don't worry, don't worry. I got a D8 coming around, he'll move it. So the D8 gets round, hooks onto the ready-mix truck, holds it into the right position. Then they undo the slides, start wetting the slide down so they can pour the concrete into the footing. And so they start. And I look down, and there's the guy folding the chute up. And then the truck drives away. So everybody up on the berm with me saying, what's going on, Pete? What's going on? What's going on? I says, I don't know. I don't know. But I will find out. So I go running down there, and I say to I had a technician doing the inspection. I said, what is the heck of the, what are you doing? What are you doing? He said, well, when we started this project, you got us all together and told us that this was going to probably be one of the landmarks of construction in the United States. He said, and we would not do anything that would hinder or be unsafe or be not following the plans. He said, and that truck was overtime. And for those of you not involved in it, once you start this mixer going, you've only got X number of minutes to get it in to the form. Well, they'd blown the minutes by getting stuck and waiting for a dozer to. So I said, he said, it was overtime, so I rejected it and told it to go. So I had to do some thinking, because I got to get back up to the top where all these people and their camera units from the Disney studio were there. And they were all saying, what happened? I said, oh, it was a bad mix. We couldn't do anything about it. It was bad, so we just ignored it, hauled it away. We'll get it done properly. I thought, yeah, I better not have any more of these or I'll be the one rejected. Space Mountain. Here she is. That circular waffle slag there is 100 feet in the air. It's supported on 4 cylindrical columns. And when there's a high wind, it starts to lean. So we have to be real careful on constructing roof panels to balance off each other so that we don't have a lot of wind pushing it one way and it drops. I don't know what you call it, but he could fix any engine, and he policed, I think it was about 4 or 5 of these engines, had them all shipped to Tampa Bay shipyard, then took them apart, and I mean everything came off, everything. They go through, do an inspection, and approve some parts for use in rebuilding them, and dump the rest of them. And they put together, so there's 3 engines that are absolutely authentic. And my son, well, one of my sons, the youngest one, got to ride that first loop around the Magic Kingdom, held by the engineer as he drove around. And that concludes my aborted attempt to entertain you people.
Wasn't that great? We're going to take a real quick 10-minute break. If you would love to go over and visit with the exhibitors during that 10-minute